My mother looked me dead in the eye at my sister's lavish wedding reception and asked the entire room, "Why is this defect here?" My sister laughed, holding her champagne glass high, and added, "You weren't invited. Get out before you embarrass us." For 9 years, my family of elite surgeons treated me like a dirty secret just because I didn't get a medical degree. But before security could grab my arms, the groom, a world-renowned hospital owner, pushed through the crowd, his face pale as snow. He looked at my mother, then at my sister, and yelled, "How dare you? This woman is—" I just smiled, adjusted my designer coat, and whispered, "You have no idea who I am now, do you?" Follow my story until the very end to see how their arrogance ruined them, and comment the city or country you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Maya, and I'm 32 years old. In the Sterling household, blood wasn't just thicker than water, it was measured in medical degrees. My father was the chief of orthopedic surgery at the state's most prestigious hospital, and my mother was a renowned pediatric surgeon whose opinion was treated like gospel in high society circles. Growing up, dinner table conversations weren't about hobbies, feelings, or childhood dreams. They were clinical case studies. From the time I could speak, my path was already mapped out. I was expected to follow in my parents' footsteps, attend an Ivy League medical school, and wear a white lab coat like a badge of royal lineage. My younger sister, Chloe, fit the mold effortlessly. She was the golden child, a prodigy who could memorize anatomical terms before she even finished middle school. She soaked in my parents' praise like sunlight, while I struggled to find my footing. I didn't hate science, but my heart wasn't in medicine. I was obsessed with systems, technology, and building software that solved complex problems. When I was 23, during my second year of pre-med, I reached my breaking point. I sat my parents down in our vaulted living room and told them the truth. I was dropping out of pre-med to pursue software engineering and business management. The reaction wasn't just disappointment. It was pure, unadulterated venom. My mother dropped her teacup, her eyes narrowing into slits. "A coder," she sneered, as if I had told her I was joining a circus. "We are doctors, Maya. We save lives. We don't sit in dark rooms typing meaningless lines on a screen like glorified clerks." My father didn't even look at me. He just stood up, adjusted his gold watch, and said, "If you choose to disgrace this family's legacy, you do it without our name, our money, or our roof." Chloe sat in the corner, a smirk playing on her lips, saying nothing to defend me. That night, 9 years ago, I packed my life into a single suitcase. My mother watched me walk toward the front door and uttered words that would burn into my brain for nearly a decade. "You are a defect in this family, Maya. Don't ever come back." When you're thrown into the cold with nothing but a single suitcase and a fire in your chest, you quickly learn what you're made of. I rented a tiny, windowless basement apartment that smelled of damp concrete and old paper. To pay for my tuition at a local state university and cover my living expenses, I worked 3 jobs: waiting tables at a 24-hour diner, tutoring high school math, and working overnight shifts as a junior tech support technician. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. There were nights I survived on cold coffee and sheer defiance. Whenever my legs pained or my eyes burned from staring at code until 4 a.m., my mother's voice would echo in my mind, "You are a defect." I used that cruelty as fuel. During my senior year of software engineering, I noticed a massive gap in how hospitals managed their supply chains and critical equipment logistics. Surgeries were being delayed, expensive medical devices were being misplaced, and life-saving equipment was often stalled in bureaucratic red tape. I began drafting a software platform designed to streamline hospital operations, automate medical supply chains, and track high-value equipment in real time using artificial intelligence. I pitched the idea to a tech incubator. A retired healthcare executive saw the genius in the system and invested our initial seed funding. Together, we co-founded OmniMed Logistics. The next 5 years were a blur of rapid growth. We weren't just a startup anymore. We became the backbone of modern healthcare infrastructure across the region. Hospitals using our software reduced operational delays by 40% and saved millions in lost equipment. By the time I turned 32, OmniMed Logistics was valued at over $200 million. I had become a discreet multimillionaire. But I didn't splash my face across tech magazines or parade my wealth on social media. I kept a low public profile, operating behind the scenes, letting my company's massive influence speak for itself. I had built an empire without a single dollar for my parents, and without a single medical degree to my name. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the thick, gold-embossed envelope arrived at my corporate headquarters. It had been forwarded from a mailing address associated with an old tax filing, proof that whoever sent it hadn't bothered to look up where I actually lived. I opened it to find a stunning velvet wedding invitation. My sister, Chloe, was marrying Julian Vance. I recognized the Vance name immediately. Julian was the sole heir and chief operating officer of the Vance Healthcare Network, a massive, multi-state chain of private hospitals and elite clinics. He was healthcare royalty, making him the absolute dream son-in-law for my status-obsessed parents. Tucked inside the invitation was a handwritten card from Chloe. There was no warmth in it. The message read, "Maya, I doubt you're doing much with your life these days, but Mom said I should send this to our old address just so you know what real success looks like. We're getting married at the Grand Crest Estate. Don't worry about buying a gift. We know you can't afford our registry." I stared at the card, feeling a cold smile creep across my face. She thought she was sending me a cruel reminder of what I had been excluded from. What she didn't know was that 3 weeks prior, OmniMed Logistics had finalized a landmark deal. My board of directors had just signed a contract to acquire a 51% controlling stake in the Vance Healthcare Network, saving it from a massive logistical crisis and injecting $80 million in capital. Julian Vance and his entire board were officially reporting to my executive team. I had originally planned to skip the wedding, but realizing that the reception was being held at the exact same estate where Julian and his board members had requested an informal introduction with their new primary investor, I decided it was time to attend. Not to make a scene and not to seek revenge, but to close my deal and finally close the chapter on my past. The Grand Crest Estate was blindingly opulent. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, glass sculptures adorned every corner, and the air was thick with the scent of imported white roses and expensive cologne. The room was packed with estate's medical elite, prominent surgeons, hospital directors, and high society donors. Everyone was dressed in tailored tuxedos and custom designer gowns. I walked into the ballroom wearing a minimalist, bespoke charcoal gray dress coat paired with subtle diamond studs. I didn't need to wear flashy logos. Quiet confidence carries a presence of its own. As I made my way toward the open bar to grab a sparkling water, a sharp, familiar voice sliced through the ambient chamber music. Are my eyes deceiving me, or did security let a vagrant in? I turned around slowly. My mother stood there, draped in an emerald green silk gown, her arms crossed over her chest. Beside her was my father, looking as rigid and arrogant as the day he kicked me out. Chloe stood next to them in her massive lace wedding dress, holding a glass of vintage champagne. "Maya?" Chloe sneered, stepping forward with an exaggerated look of disgust. "You actually came? I wrote that card as a joke. Did you really think you belonged here?" My father stepped into my space, his eyes cold and disapproving. "Look at you," he said quietly, ensuring those standing nearby could hear. 9 years, and you haven't changed a bit. Still clinging to the fringes of a society you were never smart enough to join. "I was invited," I replied calmly, keeping my voice level. "Invited?" My mother scoffed loudly, attracting the attention of several nearby doctors and high-profile guests. "Why is this defect here? You dropped out, disgracefully abandoned our family, and now you show up at your sister's $1 million wedding looking like a tragic charity case." A small circle of guests began to form around us, whispering behind their hands. Chloe stepped closer, her voice dripping with venom. "Security," she called out, raising her hand. "Please remove this woman. She didn't buy a ticket, she isn't on the guest list, and she's embarrassing my family on my wedding day." 2 large security guards in black suits immediately began pushing through the crowd, heading straight for me. "Is there a problem here?" The crowd parted as Julian Vance walked toward the commotion. He looked handsome in his tailored tuxedo, but his face carried the visible stress of a man managing a multi-million-dollar healthcare empire undergoing a massive corporate restructuring. My mother immediately pivoted, her face softening into a sycophantic smile. "Julian, darling, I'm so sorry about this disturbance. Well, this is my estranged daughter, Maya. She snuck in to cause a scene. We were just having security throw her out." Chloe grabbed Julian's arm, pouting dramatically. "Julian, she's ruining our moment. Tell security to drag her out." Julian's eyes shifted from my mother to Chloe, and then finally landed on me. The moment his eyes met mine, his face drained of all color. The glass of scotch in his hand trembled slightly. He dropped his arm from Chloe's grip as if her touch had suddenly burned him. "Maya?" Julian breathed, his voice barely a whisper. My mother frowned, clearly confused. "Julian, don't use her name. She doesn't deserve to be acknowledged by someone of your standing." "Shut up," Julian said, his voice cracking. The room went dead silent. My mother blinked, startled. "What did you say?" Julian turned on my mother and sister, his face flushed with a mixture of terror and rage. "I said shut up, both of you." He turned toward the security guards who were now inches away from me. "How dare you put your hands near this woman? Get away from her right now." The security guards froze, visibly terrified, and backed away immediately. Chloe grabbed Julian's shoulder, her voice shrill. "Julian, what are you doing? She's nobody. She's a college dropout. She's a defect." "She isn't a defect, you idiot," Julian shouted, his voice echoing across the high ceilings of the ballroom, halting every conversation in the building. "This woman is Ms. Maya Sterling, the founder, Chief Executive Officer, and majority shareholder of OmniMed Logistics." The silence in the room was so heavy you could hear the fizzing of champagne bubbles in the glasses nearby. My mother's jaw dropped so low it looked unhinged. My father stood paralyzed, his eyes wide as saucer plates. Chloe stared at Julian as if he had suddenly started speaking an ancient, dead language. "Cicio?" my father stammered, stepping forward, his confident demeanor entirely shattered. "Julian, there must be a mistake. Maya works in computers. She dropped out of pre-med." "There is no mistake, Dr. Sterling," Julian said bitterly, turning to my father. "OmniMed Logistics is the tech juggernaut that currently powers over 400 medical networks across the country. And as of 9 a.m. this morning, her board finalized the acquisition of 51% of my family's company." Julian turned back to face me, taking a deep breath, and bowed his head slightly in front of the entire crowd of guests. "Ms. Sterling," Julian said, his tone entirely respectful and subservient. "I had no idea you were related to the Sterlings. If I had known my bride's family had treated our primary investor with such disrespect." "You didn't know, Julian," I said smoothly, taking a quiet sip of my sparkling water. "Because my family made it very clear 9 years ago that I was no longer a part of their legacy." I pulled a thin, leather-bound document folder from my coat pocket and opened it slowly. "Since we're all here talking about healthcare management," I continued, my voice carrying clearly through the silent crowd, "I should inform you why I personally came tonight. As the new controlling entity of the Vance Network, my legal team initiated a routine audit of all affiliated medical practices 3 days ago." My father's face went from pale to ghostly gray. "It appears," I said, glancing at the document, "that Dr. Sterling's orthopedic clinic has been overbilling supply costs by nearly 30% for the past 4 years, using unverified third-party vendors. And Chloe's newly established dermatology clinic has several severe compliance violations that could cost her medical license." Chloe let out a horrified gasp, clutching her dress. "Maya, please. You can't do this. It's my wedding day." "I'm not doing anything, Chloe," I replied calmly. "The state regulatory board is. I just signed the audit authorization this morning." My mother burst into genuine tears, reaching out to touch my arm, but I stepped back, completely out of her reach. "Maya, please," she sobbed, no longer the arrogant matriarch, but a terrified woman watching her family's precious reputation crumble into dust in front of the state's highest society. We're your family. You can't destroy your father's career. You can't ruin Chloe's future. Think of what people will say. 9 years ago, I said softly, looking at my mother, my father, and my sister one last time, you cared more about status than your own daughter. You told me that without a medical degree, I was nothing. Well, it turns out that the defect you threw away was the only thing that could have saved you. I closed the leather folder, tucked it back under my arm, and looked at Julian. Mr. Vance, our board meeting is rescheduled for Monday at 8 a.m. in my office. Don't be late. Of course, Miss Sterling, Julian said quietly, not even looking at his hysterical bride. I turned on my heel and walked out of the Grand Crest estate. Behind me, I could hear the chaotic explosion of whispers from the guests, my mother's frantic crying, and my sister screaming at Julian as their picture-perfect world shattered into 1,000 irrecoverable pieces. As I stepped out into the crisp night air and waited for my driver to pull up, I took a deep, clean breath. For 9 years, I thought I needed to prove them wrong. But as my car door was held open for me, I realized the truth. I didn't need their approval, their forgiveness, or their title. I had built my own life, on my own terms, with my own hands. I settled into the leather seat, looked out at the glowing city skyline, and smiled. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have spared your family, or let them face the consequences of their arrogance? Comment below and let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this.